things. That's their sort of society that they have. They consider it dishonorable not to have the same things as others. There's also, in terms of education, there's a high suicide rate in Japan because of how strict the education system is on the children. A lot of kids kill themselves because they can't stand the pressure, and if they get anything lower than an A, they don't compete, then they consider to be disowned or dishonored by the family, they kill themselves. It's a very common phenomenon. In Germany, there's a higher rate of xenophobia. Even after the Third Reich, after they killed a bunch of Jews, they still have a very high rate of xenophobia. They're still very racist against blacks and Muslims and Jews, very anti-Semitic. They're very hardworking, but they only care about themselves for the most part as a society. And I'm sorry to be very general. I mean, there are a lot of good Germans too, and there's some who convert to Islam, but in general, their culture is very much like this. And so let's go into the larger topic then, shall we? Every society has problems. So I can mention ones for the United States and Europe in general, and then even in Malaysia, if you want, I can talk about certain things. I won't to offend a lot of people in here, but let's mention morality and God. In what way do you want me to express my opinion? Do you want me to express how morality and ethics are justified by God, or how they become valid as a result of believing God?
It's the relation between the atheism and the religion. For me, we cannot separate between believing in God and religion.
Mm-hmm.
There's two levels: believing in God and choosing which type of religion is the best. I mean the truth. So actually, the religion for me is the fruit of religion is morality and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
But they say, the atheism say, they can still achieve the highest level of morality and ethics, even though they don't believe in God and they don't have religion.
Okay.
Some of them, they produce high level of technology. They do a lot of charity,
Mm-hmm.
and they say that they make a better world without believing in God. So what's your comment?
That's very interesting. You've asked actually a number of questions in there. So do you want the Islamic response first or the philosophical one?
Philosophical.
Okay. The philosophical one is this. Atheists claim that they can be moral without the existence of a creator or a legislator because they believe that they themselves determine values and morality. The problem with this is it's very highly subjective in the sense that just because a society derives values and morals or ethics or what they consider to be something good from themselves doesn't mean that others will agree to it. Okay? There's no valid reason for me to accept this society's version of morality just because they say they can. So if an atheist society says, okay, we want to live like this, but I decide I don't want to live like that, I want to live with a different society that has a different moral standard, who's to say that they're right and that I'm wrong, or that I'm right and they're wrong? What determines that? That's the first question I would ask. Because when you start saying that human beings are the ones who create legislation and morality and things like this, you may be describing descriptively what happens, but prescriptively, whether it should happen is another question. Because many societies who have not had any sort of higher standard or ideology often change very quickly, one, and they're often based on very materialistic needs and desires that can lead down the wrong path. And I'll give you an example. It is true that atheists these days argue that their societies are more enlightened, they're much better at charity and things like this. However, it's also very true that many atheist societies less than 100 years ago were committing mass slaughter on a scale unheard of in history. So I would ask the atheists, what's the distinction between that group and your group? What's the difference? Why was Stalin's Russia worse than your society now? Because for Stalin, he didn't care if he killed 1,000 people. It wasn't a big deal because he was still okay, and so were the people that he liked, right? So why is that wrong? Now, atheists may say because it's counterproductive, but Stalin might be like, well, he's not alive now, but he might be like, why is it counterproductive? I'm still alive. I'm still eating. My friends and family are okay. So what's the problem? What I'm trying to say is that an atheist can never justify their morality unless they point to some sort of higher standard. And usually you'll hear atheists suggesting something along the lines of rights, okay, human rights, or human productivity, or something of this sort. But in actuality, those are ideas. These are like ideals, like almost in the same way like God. That is the very thing that legislates the way that they behave, right? So atheists cannot escape a metaphysical or a philosophical grounding for their belief that it has some sort of supernaturalism tied to it. It may not be a deity, like a God, beyond physical time and space, but it might be an abstract concept that they themselves can't prove. So it may be like human rights, for instance. There are a lot of people who believe human rights like they actually exist. Human rights don't actually exist. Human rights are just drafted by societies on what they agree upon based on whatever standards they have elsewhere. But human rights itself it doesn't exist somewhere in the sky, telling us how to live our lives. It's a completely arbitrary document, which, by the way, is violated on numerous occasions by the very same countries that drafted it. So it's highly arbitrary, and it's usually, and people exploit it all the time. So I would say that this is a much deeper discussion, actually, and it could take a couple of hours to discuss, because the philosophy of ethics is a huge field, and there are many numerous arguments in response to even what I've said. But that would be the basic answer. The Islamic answer is very simple. The Islamic answer says to these atheists who claim to be good, he says in Surah An-Nur, right? He says, they perceive their good deeds, right? Well, they think they're doing good, but actually what they see is a mirage in the desert. And when they get there, Allah will be waiting for them to hold them accountable. So it says that their deeds are like a mirage. They're not real, because they're not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the existential reality, the reality of existence, the very purpose for our existence. When an atheist claims that humanity is the purpose of existence, they turn that into their God. Humanism, they turn that into their God. They say scientific advancement is there, they turn that into their God. So the reality, the real God, the real one to be worshipped, is what validates morality based on Islamic ethics. So, I hope that was sufficient. We can talk more about it in the future. So it's a very big topic, actually. I can even give you some reading material, because ethics is one of the largest fields in philosophy, and it's still one of the most highly disputed, to be honest.
Is it possible for us to get copies of your slide?
Yes, you may have copies of my slide, though I was hoping, I should have told you this earlier, I don't really want to give my slides away, not because I don't want you sharing it, but because I feel as though you won't take notes if I tell you I'm going to give you my slides. And the best way to learn is if you take notes, because you're actually concentrating. If you're just sitting there waiting, he'll give me my slides later, you'll be more passive, and you won't be as active in trying to memorize the material. But I will give you the slides, but I do hope that at least tomorrow, for those of you who are more lax about taking notes, if you can try, because tomorrow we're going to be going through a lot of material that you have to memorize. It's not an option. And if you don't understand the material, you're not going to be able to do what I'm hoping you can do by the end of this course. So. Okay. Anyone else? We done? Oh, okay. One last question, or that's it? All right, alhamdulillah.